Hey guys, what's up? We're back, and in the last video we talked about Bootstrap, basically just customizing Bootstrap so that it looks like what we have now, right? So something a little bit stylish, and not just like some words on the screen or on some white vanilla background or whatever. You want to have some kind of flavor to whatever you're designing, right? All right. So now, however, we have this header. If we look at the app component, we have this header here, basically hard coded inside of the app component. Okay, so I don't really like that. You should have the app component is going to be the first thing that is going to load. So that's going to basically kind of hold your entire structure inside your computer, inside your application, but it shouldn't be this way. It should be compartmentalized, if that makes any sense. And the reason why is because when you're using components and you keep them separated, you create what is called a separation of concerns. Separation of concerns, in other words, it means that if you have to troubleshoot a specific area or change something in a specific area, you can target that specific area separately without having to deal with dealing with other sibling components included inside of this same file, all clashing against each other. Okay, so which brings me to my point: how do you even create another component? Well, that's the good thing, because that's what this video is really going to be about. It's going to be about how do you use the CLI to create your first component and how to actually make this component look, like show up, right? All right, so if you remember, well, if you watched the other video for React that I have, where we made this task tracker application in React, and we're going to basically do the same thing for Angular. I did talk about having some kind of structure here in my root to where I would keep certain things, right? So certain folders where I will keep certain things. Organization is very important when it comes to this, mainly because if this is your business that you're doing this for and you're the only one that's ever going to deal with it, if you want to have a mess in there, that's fine. You're the only one that's going to deal with it. But if you're working for somebody else, you kind of want to have some kind of structure that other developers are going to be able to understand and they're going to be able to follow. So technically you want to follow the same standard as everyone else, but if you have the ability to create the standard that people will follow, then I would just suggest to having a compartmentalization of things, right? So I like to have three main folders at least in there, and I'm gonna go ahead and add them now just so I can have them there. So right here, just click new folder, and we're gonna create one called components and hit enter. Get back on here and create the folder, which is the same one as over here, and this one is going to be called pages. Pages. And then get back over here and create another one, and this one is going to be called parts. You can call it parts, you can call it partials, you can call it sections. I call it parts, and I'll explain what these are meant to be for. Okay. All right, so why do I need these three different folders here, right? So components is where I'm going to put things that are not necessarily sections of a website, but they are smaller components that I can use in every page all over the place. Like for example, buttons, some type of icon, or some type of a specific small header, not the main website header like this one here that we're using, but a page header, like just for a page itself that contains the page name and maybe some button area to put some buttons in there, things like that. Some structural components maybe, but most parts, most of the time, it's going to be smaller components, like a specific type of heading, things like that. Pages, that's self-explanatory. This is where I'm going to put my component that is going to render the content for each specific page. So in there you're going to see home, you're going to see about, you're going to see contact. All of these are specific pages, and inside these specific pages I will have components like buttons inside the about page, and also there will be buttons inside the contact page. So there will be those components in this folder that will be referenced inside these pages in there. And then you have parts. Now parts, to me, they speak more to like architectural parts of the website. So like the skeleton parts of the website. For example, the header, the footer, the sidebars, or the navigation bar, or something like that. So these are like if you were gonna build a house, in here is where I will put the roof, the floor, and the bedrooms. I don't know. That's the best way I can say it. Okay. And pages will probably be just like, you know, the living room, you know, things like that. And then components will be like the chair, the TV, the nightstand, things like that, if that makes any sense. All right, so now that I have there, we're gonna go ahead and add, we're gonna go ahead and transfer this right here, which is our header, and that, as I said, is a part, right? We're gonna consider it a part. And then we can, if you want to, you can break it down and make this a component itself. And you can break this down even and put this navigation also as a component itself. But would you need to? So think about components as it's not a trivial thing to just do components just for the hell of it. Like for example, like, oh, this right here, I'm just gonna make this a component. Well, I mean, think about it. Are you going to need it somewhere else? If you're gonna need it somewhere else, then sure, make a component. But if you're not, if this is the only place that it's ever going to live in, then just leave it the way it is. It's fine in there, because that will be the only place that it will ever be updated, you know, changed or whatever, right? And in this case, it's doing this particular line right here is doing a specific job, which is going to be the logo inside the header, you know, and that's pretty much it. That's where it's always going to be. Okay. There will be other things that look like this in other places of the site, but they're not going to be specifically for this particular role, which is going to be the logo in the header. Every website has only one header and one logo, so there's no need to make this a component. Okay, but we are going to make this entire nav an actual component inside of parts. So let's get to it. How do we do it? All right, so remember when we talked, let me go ahead and close this a little bit so you have more room to work. Remember when I talked about the CLI generating components and things like that, and you want to use the CLI to make the components? Well, that's exactly what we're gonna do. In the React tutorial that I did right before this one, we created the components in here by manually adding a file and things like that, right? Well, because Angular uses this separation, React kind of put everything in one file. A React file has HTML, JavaScript, and CSS all in one file. But Angular separates the three elements in three individual files separated from each other. Well, four if you add the testing one. But I never really use this one unless I'm instructed to do some unit testing. But we're not gonna do unit testing here, so we don't have to worry about this. It will be 3 or 2 or whatever files, HTML, CSS, and TypeScript, right? So instead of creating all of these files by like manually, and then have to build our own structure for the component, and then have to add it to the app module and declare it over there so that it can actually work, we're going to use a CLI, and the CLI is going to do a lot of work for us. Okay, so this is how you do it. First thing is you put ng, which is basically your first command to call the CLI for Angular. You're basically just saying right there, hey Angular, okay, G, generate. That's what that means. It's the same thing as typing it out, but there is a small way to say it, which is going to be G. A Angular, generate component, a C. Or you can write it if you want to. You can write it if you want to, but you can just leave it right here. NGGC, Angular generate component, Angular generate service, Angular generate directive. Okay, so Angular generate component. We're gonna name a component now. The first thing, the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna write the path to the component. This one is gonna be in parts, okay? And this generate component, the initial root that is going to be declared is going to be this app folder right here. So everything, so you don't have to put right here, you don't have to put I don't know, Angular task tracker slash src slash app slash parts slash header. You don't have to do all of this, okay? You don't have to go, oh wait, I messed up here somewhere. You don't have to go all the way back. Yeah, I messed up a lot. Stack tracker. There you go. You don't have to do all of this, okay? You don't have to go way back, okay? It'll start from here, from the app folder already. It already knows that you are using the app folder. So technically speaking, you just need to omit all of this and just declare it from the component, excuse me, from that parts folder in here, and then the actual name of the component that you want to name. Now, careful with the word header, okay? Because there is something. So before I create this, you need to be aware of this. If I look at, I'm gonna show you something. Okay, so if we look at the component here, right, at the basic structure of a component, because this is what this, once I hit enter down here, it's going to create something similar to this, and it's going to add a selector that is going to be called header. But if I ask, or actually it's going to be called app slash header, because it's going to prepend app. Okay, now if I use that, if I use header and then it will just basically turn into app header, right? I usually delete this app part out and end up with header. The problem with that is that if you use a component eventually and you do this, it's going to cause an issue. The reason why is because Angular is not going to know that this is your component that you created. It's going to think that this is an actual header tag for HTML. The reason why is because this is an actual tag for HTML. It's called a semantic tag. Just like if I were going to create a footer, I wouldn't name a footer like that, because that's also a semantic tag. I also wouldn't create a component called div, because that is a semantic tag for HTML. So you see what I mean? You have to be careful that whatever you name your component, it's not going to eventually render a component in the name of something that is already an HTML tag, because this is essentially how you're going to use a component like this, and you don't want it to be confused. So because of that, so you kind of just, that's just something that you just have to have running in the back of your head. Because of that, I'm not going to call it header. I'm going to call it main header. I got a tickle in my nose. Sorry, it's allergies. Excuse me. All right. Anyway, sorry. So again, just to recap, we're basically working with the CLI, and we're telling the CLI, Angular, generate a component inside parts slash, and the name of, there's nothing inside parts, so therefore if it doesn't find anything, it's going to create it, and it's going to be created as main header. All right, but sure enough, good enough. Now, before I hit enter, there are other specifications in there, like for example, you can put, I think it's called -spec, which means it's not going to create this spec here. Let me just make sure, because that could actually save us some time, because if you're not going to do unit testing, you're not going to need this file, this app component, I mean this spec.ts. Angular CLI generate without spec, file. Let's see what it says, because I'm pretty sure it's like -spec or something like that. Let's see, somebody here, oh, skip test true, right? Okay, so this is basically just like I had it here. So we're just gonna add this right here, skip test true, and we're gonna add it. That's cool, we're gonna do that. Let's bring that closer here. let's get back to this. Where was I? Okay, so inside here, before you name it, there you go. All right, so recapping again. Angular, generate a component and skip the tests. Look for parts folder which exists, and look for main header file or folder in it, which it doesn't, therefore create one because it didn't find it. Now I'm gonna hit enter, and there's going to be those things, those messages. So these messages here basically tells you what the CLI did for you. It created a component, a main header, that component SAS file inside where you wanted it, right? Inside the parts, it created a folder for it and it organized it for you. So you can see it now. If you go to parts, you're gonna see a main folder, a folder called main header. So it even does that for you. It even organizes it inside of a folder as well, which is a good thing. Okay, and it added a CSS file in there, it added an HTML file in there, and it added a TypeScript file in there. It didn't create the spec because we're not using the spec file, we're not using unit testing. And then it updated the app module TS. So now if we go look at the app module TS, you're gonna see here that there is a main header component that has been added, and here's with the location for it, and it also has been declared. So that's a great thing, because normally you would have to do this by hand if you didn't use the CLI. So kudos. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, so now that we have created this, now we can use it. So first thing I like to do is let's just go ahead and go to, let me close this right here, let me close that, and I'm gonna close that as well. So before I move anything in here or out of here, I'm going to go check out what I created, and I'm going to open the component, the app main header component. First thing I like to do, it's a matter of preference. You don't have to, okay? It's a matter of preference. I don't like using the app in front of it. I don't know why. It bugs me, so I just take that out, okay? And this is why I call the main header. Remember, this is why I call the main header. If I would have just called the header, it would have created something like this, and then when I got rid of it, then it would have done that, and that's bad, because then I have to use it as a header tag, which it would create a conflict. But because I created it as main header, once I eliminate the app dash, then it leaves it as main header, which is good. Okay, one thing that I am not going to do is I am not going to have any CSS that is going to be particular to this header itself. Why? Because I have the CSS that I want already in here. This CSS is global. It's going to touch my navbar. It's touching the entire site. So therefore, I don't need to declare anything specifically here. Now, could I had in here skip CSS true? Maybe. Look it up, see if it exists. If it exists and you want to use it, then that's fine. Then that means that you won't have to create it and then take it off. But if it doesn't exist, then I'll just manually take it off from here, hit enter, and then I just come over here and delete it manually. It's the one that is the CSS, obviously. Good, so now all I have is my HTML file and my TypeScript file. That's basically all I need for now. All right, so let's see what it is that it created for me. So it created a main header. First of all, it didn't import, right? It imported the basic two things that every component is going to need, which is going to be the component, what's the word for this? Decorator. Right there, it says it right there. The component decorator, so that you can make these type of calls, right? The selector, identifier, and the call to the template URL that you're going to be using, the HTML. Okay, if later on we have to do any kind of a HTTP request or something like that, we may have to do a provider in here, so we can call a service, so things like that. And it creates this on init, and then I'll explain what that on it is. I'll explain what is on init is in a minute. Okay, then it created a component decorator for us automatically, which is good, and all we had to do just basically modify it a little bit, but it created it for us. And then it created this class right here, and this is where all the meat and potatoes will go, and I explained this one already in the app component, so I'm not gonna go over it completely, but it did add this, which I didn't have in the other component that you saw, but it added it to this one, implements on init, which is this, right? And if you keep going, you're gonna see that there is a constructor where you would use the constructor to initialize certain things, mostly services and some type of providers that you're going to be using. They're going to be initialized inside the constructor. A constructor is somewhat of a component that lives separately, that already runs in a specific way. There's a lot more to this. I'm not gonna go over it too much, but we will get to use it, but briefly, okay? And then we have this ng on init, which is declared as void because it's not returning any data back to us. If we were using an HTTP request or something like that, that we're gonna be pulling some kind of data, then it wouldn't be void. You would just basically leave that out. But for right now, since I'm not really pulling any data yet, I'm gonna leave it there, okay? But the ng on init is a lifecycle method. And what it's basically saying, or what it does, is that it's telling Angular to do whatever is in here, the code that you put in here, it's gonna say do the code in here as soon as it loads on the website. As soon as my website, my code, my component loads on the DOM. Okay, so it's a lifecycle method. So if you had an HTTP request again, right, you will put it here because you want that HTTP request to be called as soon as the website loads. That way it goes to the server and it brings the data, boom, and it shows right away. Okay, if you don't put it there and you put it somewhere else, then it would not be called. It will wait there waiting for you to call it. Like, how do you want me to come? Like, do you want to click a button to call me? Do you want to do some kind of calculations or some kind of modifications to your files to call me? Or do you want me to be inside here so that I could be called as soon as the website wakes up, as soon as the website loads on the browser? Well, normally that's what it would be, okay? Unless it is, again, like a contact or something like that, like a button that you click and then something shows up. All right, so this right here, don't worry too much about this, about changing this. This is just how it's being defined in the app component TS, so don't worry about it too much. Just know that this is where you will put your code, basically, and then inside here, maybe about like above here, is where you will put like a lot of declarations of variable declarations and things like that. Okay, all right, so now that we have it here, that we have the selector that we're going to use, I'm going to copy that selector and I'm going to go to my app right here, my component app, and I'm going to use it just like that. And then when I hit enter, watch what happens. It says main header works. Okay, so that means that I am able to use it. So where's that main header works? Again, if we go back to the component right here for the main header, you're gonna see that there is an HTML file that goes with it, right? And that HTML file says main header works, and this is created by Angular itself, where it's basically just gonna put whatever you name your component, and then works. It does that. It does this just so you can see something on the screen, just so when you use it, you can tell that something happened and it's working. Okay, so we're not going to use this, obviously. What we're going to do is, let me just keep this open, double click it. We're going to bring this nav right here, and we're going to cut it out. I'm going to hit save, so it's going to go away. That's fine. And we're going to go to the main header now, and we're going to replace it for this right here, just like that, and hit save, and then it's back. So now this is basically the same thing we had before, but it's using a main header instead. It's using an actual component instead. So now I can create the rest of my components. I can create no, not that. I can create a container div, right? And then in here, this will be my body content, or my page content here. And then if I wanted a footer, it would just be down here whenever I have a component to use for it. But this right here, this page content here, will be what will be replacing basically the components that I'm going to be using. So if you see it, there you go. You know, if you, not if you see it, but right there. All right, so now if we look at the main TS, not main TS, sorry, I completely messed up that. Sorry, I'm looking, give me a minute, give me a moment. It's not the main TS, where is it? Component. Oh, okay, yeah, I haven't added it yet. Never mind, sorry. I thought I had already added something that to show you, but I didn't. So let's just scrap that part. You know, just let's go back. Okay, we're good now. All right, so yeah, so as a matter of fact, I'm just gonna leave it right here, just because I don't want to confuse you guys a little bit more than this, and I think this is probably enough for you to go on with. And we're gonna go ahead and start adding more code, and you know, start building the rest of the application on the next videos. Okay, all right, I'll see you guys later.